I can confidently say that I'm able to enjoy a movie even if I notice some mistakes. I just might not be praising the movie as much. It's still a great movie even though it's not flawless. I think these kinds of distinctions ought to be made more often in a lot of cases. There is a huge difference between saying this movie is flawless and saying I like this movie. To someone like me, hearing someone else describe a movie as flawless is almost like a call to action. I mean, how many truly flawless movies are there? But if instead it's something like I like this movie, mistakes and plot holes and all, then what can I really say about that? I will always point out mistakes or inconsistencies or outright plot holes in movies. I'm that kind of guy. I don't really know why I do that, I just kinda have to. It makes me feel superior? Not in a Nazi kind of way, maybe in a Nazi kind of way, I'm not sure anymore, I'm gonna have to talk about that with my therapist. But here's the thing, lately I've been thinking that maybe it's not always the best thing to point out mistakes in movies that others love. Especially if they did not seek out a video on the topic and you're just having a Harry Potter marathon Christmas party. This realization hit when it was pointed out to me that Whiplash might not be flawless after all. I have absolutely no ear for music, nor do I have a sense of rhythm. And I'm glad I don't, because people that do can't really call Whiplash perfect.
Now, I know this isn't going to affect the average viewer's experience, but as someone that plays a lot of instruments, unfortunately there were countless points in the film where I noticed that what was being played wasn't exactly accurate. Not only were a lot of the notes distractingly off sync for me, but many of the hits that you hear aren't even being played. It's not really something that's going to bother the average viewer because at most it's only about one hit every measure that's being missed. Most of what he's playing is also pretty fast, so if you're not the type to pick up on it, it's not going to bother you. Again, it doesn't happen the entire movie, but it does happen a lot.
I know what I am, and what I am is an anal asshole. So if I could tell mistakes in music, I definitely wouldn't be praising this movie as much as I am now. I'm able to enjoy this movie in part because I don't speak the language of music. But I do speak other languages, which has ruined certain scenes in certain movies and TV shows for me. The story of Chernobyl takes place in Ukraine during the Soviet era, but all the characters speak English, British English for that matter. And even though I'd prefer it if they spoke Russian and Ukrainian, I understand that wouldn't be very good for business. After all, they are trying to sell it to as many people as possible. Plus, there is a Russian-made Chernobyl movie. It's fucking terrible. There are a couple of them actually, and not all of them are bad, but none of them really compare to this one, because of the huge budget and a lot of big names. Also, the English is primarily oral. All the signs, buttons, anything that's written is in Russian and Ukrainian. And I prefer this approach to them just reading the lines phonetically. I mean, how dumb would that be? I absolutely loved watching movies as a kid, because at the time my kid brain was not privy to the cheats and tricks used by movie makers. I did not know what a cliché or a plot hole was, and I was not aware of all the formulas used to trick my brain into sympathy for a character. I did, however, even at such a dumb age, notice a few mistakes with certain types of movies. Specifically when the movie had the bad Russians. These people absolutely do not speak Russian. This is actually a recurring problem with old Hollywood. When I used to watch movies like that, I'd get excited at the mention of Russian or other Slavic characters. Although it doesn't really matter what country they're from, they all speak Russian anyway, Americans couldn't tell the fucking difference. Sometimes they actually look kinda Russian, but that's about it. This shit used to happen a lot. It might as well be happening still, I wouldn't know, I don't watch new shit, I just rewatch old movies and TV shows. Because I'm too afraid to take a gamble and watch something new, since it might be bad, and if it's bad I'm not gonna enjoy it, and I have to enjoy it, because if I don't enjoy it that means I'm not gonna do anything enjoyable before I have to go to sleep. And when I go to sleep I have to wake up, and when I wake up I have to go to work, and I hate work. My therapist stopped replying to my messages, so thanks for letting me vent. The way I imagine it is, they hire a guy to tell them how to pronounce their lines 5 minutes before they shoot the scene. Because to anyone that speaks that language, it'll sound completely ridiculous. No quick way to check pronunciation back then, so they must have hired someone to teach the actor's pronunciation. So just let the guy you hired read the lines. Or let him dub it, what's the harm in that? How much worse of an actor can he really be? In preparation for this video, I decided to rewatch some of the old classics to make sure I'm fair. And, well, it's worse than I can remember. For one, there is a mistake in the title of the movie. On second thought, and after a not insignificant amount of research, this shit is so horribly misspelled that it might actually be a stylistic choice. The first word, krasny, meaning red, is actually spelled correctly, but the second word should be spelled like so. We have to replace 4 letters here to fix it. Let's start with the letter B, which in Russian looks like this. The letter R should look like so, and I'm sure the movie makers were aware of this because they spelled it correctly here. Now, this is where it gets a little weird. The pronunciation of October in Russian is Oktyabr, so right here we would need a ya sound, which is where the Russian letter ya should be. But we have an ia instead, which doesn't just sound wrong, but the letter I doesn't exist in Russian at all. You might think that this is an I letter here, but this is actually part of this letter. You will never see an I like this in the Russian language. This whole thing is so wrong that I have to give this movie the benefit of the doubt by assuming that this was most likely done on purpose. The first word is Russian, and the second is trying to be phonetically Russian. It would of course make more sense if when the title changes one of these words would be spelled in Russian, but be phonetically English to match the first title. So who knows, maybe I'm looking into it way too much. Anyway, I kept watching the movie and I actually kinda liked it for a while. The American submarine scene was really good. The little banter they had, all of this was fine. Then we got to the Russian submarine and I was pleasantly surprised. Actual Russian speaking actors, loads of them too. But then Sean Connery spoke.
Что ты делаешь? Переходишь жениться. Каков-нибудь покору.
I understand this doesn't sound bad to anyone who doesn't speak the language, so I found this clip that may help any English speakers understand what I mean. This is what Sean Connery sounds like to me.
Well, we have to the rocket launcher firing after the people 35 want to the blasting.
Now, don't get me wrong, I get it. All of these movies were made for American audiences. What's the point of spending time, effort and money on making the bad guys sound authentic? Especially when the bad guys are Russians in the 80s.
In recognizing a communist, physical appearance counts for nothing. If he openly declares himself to be a communist, we take his word for it. If a person consistently reads and advocates the views expressed in a communist publication, he may be a communist.
The least offensive part about all of this is that they're not main characters. I mean, imagine if the main guy of the movie didn't even speak the language of the country where he's supposedly from. Yep, he's not actually Colombian, he didn't even speak Spanish prior to this show. He learned it specifically for this role, which in itself is kind of fucking commendable.
You did not know how to speak Spanish.
I was super skinny.
Yeah.
I mean, I was 40 pounds lighter.
Yeah.
And I didn't speak a word of Spanish. So when they decided to do it, I was like, these guys are crazy. I mean, why? But I flew myself to Medellin, to Colombia, in order to, to learn Spanish. And I booked myself in a university, in a Spanish course for foreigners. So I was in a classroom with Japanese teenagers and...
He sucks ass though, his accent is terrible. I could literally not find a single positive mention of his accent on the internet. Thank God I don't speak Spanish, because I seriously doubt I would have enjoyed this show as much as I did. I rewatched Narcos recently, it's a great show. But from now on, there will always be a little voice in the back of my head reminding me that his accent is not authentic. The accent that I wouldn't even know about if I didn't read a random article that popped up on my feed one day. In the end, it doesn't matter much. I will definitely be rewatching this show again in a few years. But you know what's something that I will definitely never rewatch?
Well, it is painful for us to see so many children starving, completely unprotected by the government, and building these houses for them.
That day I decide that I don't care how Pablo makes his money, only how he uses it.
How can this be happening? This shit is so fucking silly, Jesus Christ, what are you doing, people? How is this not a skit? I understand there are other movies like this. I understand that Hollywoodization is a thing that people even outside the US are fine with, and even I myself am fine with at times. For this movie, however, I kept waiting for audience laughter throughout the whole thing. The reason this shit is silly is illustrated very well in this scene where Pablo is high and distressed, but he talks like English is not his first language, which it isn't, it's Spanish. But they don't speak Spanish, they speak English with a fucking Spanish accent, what the fuck?
The king and his princess are going out for an ice cream. What flavor do you want?
Strawberry!
Strawberry! The princess has a craving. So don't you dare to stop us or the king will cut your heads off. Open the door. Open the door.
The moral lesson of this video for me would be the fact that I shouldn't be an asshole about every little thing that may be wrong about a TV show or movie. Because you never know, you might be shitting on something that somebody else might love or have a sentimental connection to. Letting people enjoy average or below average media without berating them with facts and film knowledge would be the right thing to do. especially when that just happened to me and I saw how much I hated it. I wish I didn't know that musicians have issues with whiplash, or that Wagner Miura doesn't speak proper Colombian Spanish. So the lesson for today is, sometimes just shut the fuck up. However, I have decided that I have not learned anything today, because I have like 2 character traits. I know a little bit more about movies than the average person, and I will not let you fucking forget it. In fact, for next year's HP marathon, I will come prepared. I will rewatch that shit beforehand, plus I will Google mistakes and plot holes. Avada Kedavra is a stupid spell, the 4th one is the worst one even though it's my favorite, and Hagrid is not even a real giant. Maybe the moral lesson for today is that not every moral lesson is a moral lesson you should learn from.